The story begins in a world where many people have magical powers. We meet a girl named Nori. She always thought of herself as different from other children. But one day, something strange happened and changed her life. When she was 7 years old, she was watching her neighbors from her bedroom window. Suddenly, her eyes fell on a cat standing in the garden. At that moment, whiskers suddenly grew on her face, and she took on the exact appearance of that cat. Just then, her father entered the room, and suddenly, wings grew on Nori's back. And finally, Nori discovered her special ability. 6 years later, Nori was about to attend Sage Academy, the most famous magical school in the country, with her best friend, Reina. Nori's best friend Reina had the ability to control fire. She had great potential, but she lacked self-confidence, which often left her behind. But Nori always reminded her that she could do anything she wanted. Nori also couldn't control her powers. In fact, whenever she took the form of an animal, she would often combine 2 or 3 animals to create a hybrid. A few weeks later, Nori and Reina arrived at the bus stop to catch the bus to Sage Academy with the other children. Then, a strange man named Bud appeared from behind a tree, and he announced that he had come to take them to their new magical school. The children then said goodbye to their parents and followed the man into the forest. After walking for a while, they found a portal that led them directly to Sage Academy. Bud entered the portal first, and soon, Nori and Reina followed. The other children also entered. Upon arriving, they realized that their phones weren't working at the school. Soon, the school's principal, Linda, appeared and announced that all the children would be divided into 5 categories, based on their abilities. The first group was the Fuzzies, which would be assigned to children who could communicate with animals. The next group was the Flickers, who could pull things from a distance with their hands. Next were the Flares, who could control fire with their power. The fourth group was the Flyers, who could fly through the air. And the fifth group was the Flexers, who had the ability to take the form of any animal. Now, before classes began, all the students had to take a test, in which the professors would test their powers and divide them into groups. First, it was the Flares, who were given the task of lighting a candle placed 2 meters away. A boy named Philip went in first, and after his test, the principal gave him a card and asked him to wait outside. Later, when it was Elliot's turn, he couldn't light the candle because smoke was coming out of his hand instead of sparks. The professors were very unhappy with him. Finally, it was Reina's turn, who was the best among her classmates. She lit the candle with just her little finger. After this, the Fuzzies test took place, in which they had to interact with the dog and ask it questions. If they could understand all the dog's answers, they would pass the test. In the third test, some children were asked to use their strength to pull a flower pot toward themselves. However, when it was a girl named Pepper's turn, instead of pulling it toward herself, she pushed it away, sending it crashing directly into the wall. This resulted in her being rejected. Then, there was the flying test, in which the children had to stay 1 meter above the ground for 30 seconds. When it was a boy named Andreas's turn, as soon as he took off his heavy backpack, he instantly flew up and landed on the ceiling. His powers were beyond his control, and he was unable to come back down. The professors somehow lowered him to the ground by using a ladder. Finally, it was Nori's group's turn. After looking at a cat, they had to transform exactly like it for 6 seconds. However, when it was Nori's turn, she transformed, and wings sprouted from her back in just 2 seconds, surprising all the professors. In reality, Nori had lost control of her powers again. After the test, she received a card like the other students. After completing the test, all the students gathered in a field, where they had to open their cards to find out which group they would be in. Reina saw that she had been included in the Flare group, and she was overjoyed. But Nori noticed that she wasn't in the Flexers group. Instead, her card said, UDM. She couldn't figure out which group it was. Then the principal told all the students to go to the cafeteria to get their group uniforms. But Nori had to follow the path marked UDM. Finally, Nori said goodbye to Reina and walked through the forest. She continued on her way to the UDM headquarters. Bud greeted her there and led her to a hall underground. When Nori entered the classroom, she found other students who had failed the magic test like her. These students weren't taught magic, but were taught in the normal way, just like other students across the country. Hearing this, Nori became very angry and asked why she couldn't go and learn like the rest of the students at the academy. Just then, Principal Linda arrived and explained that UDM stands for Upside Down Magic, meaning children who haven't received their true magical powers and haven't found any use for them. Linda said, "You'll never be able to use your magic properly anyway, so it's best that you live here like normal children until you forget your magic. After that, you can go back to the real world and study with normal children," she explained. In the year 1939, this rule was created in the school because of a boy named Reginald Roberts. The boy had fallen victim to shadow magic, or black magic. Shadow magic was a type of magic used only to harm others. To counter the boy's magic, the professors and students together imprisoned him in a secret book. This shadow magic does not work without entering a human body. Then Linda revealed that shadow magic always targets UDM students. That's why they were being kept separate from the rest and were not allowed to use magic, so they would forget their powers, and this danger could be avoided. That very day, the selected children were sent to their respective group classes. Then, Reina learned that the annual Founders' Day function would be held in a few weeks. In this program, 5 new students would have the opportunity to showcase their magic in front of the entire academy. Each professor would choose the 2 best students from their group, and the winner of the competition would get the chance to perform magic at the function. Afterward, Professor Argon of Flares conducted her first class, asking Reina to use her powers to turn a cone into popcorn. Although Reina was quite nervous, she still performed the task well. Then Philip began making fun of her magic, which made her nervous, and suddenly, all the popcorn burned. Seeing this, Argon scolded Reina. Then we see Chandra, a second-grade student, standing outside the room, smiling at all this. The next morning, Bud took his students to the garden and said he had a surprise for them. When he opened the shed door, Nori saw some brooms, and she was overjoyed because she thought they would learn to fly on them. But when she tried to fly, she fell to the ground. But then we realized that it was just an ordinary broom. In fact, she had to take it and clean the school garden. Nori took a broom and went to the area where the other children's classes were being held. She saw that Professor Han was teaching them to transform into a special kind of cat. Soon, Nori heard that, on the upcoming annual Founders' Day, one child would get a chance to showcase their abilities in front of everyone. This sparked something in Nori's mind, and she decided to practice her magic so she could impress everyone with her powers. Then Linda would allow her to learn magic with the other children. After this, Nori made an excuse and went to the class. She took the cat in her hand and observed it closely. She memorized all the cat's gestures so she could transform exactly like it in front of the entire school. But then, suddenly, she lost control of her powers once again and transformed into a strange animal. Professor Han immediately called Bud and told him to control Nori. Otherwise, it would be very bad if the principal found out about this. Later, during lunchtime, when all the kids were in the cafeteria, Nori told her friends that she had drawn every detail of the cat, and now she just had to practice changing her body. Meanwhile, when Reina saw Nori, she went to meet her, but Miss Argon stopped her on the way, because children from one group couldn't mix with children from another group. Then, in the next class, Philip made popcorn with his powers, which pleased the professor, and she chose Philip as the best student in the class. Later, as Reina was walking down the corridor to another class, Chandra suddenly came up to her, and praising her magical abilities told her, "If you want to improve your powers, I can help you." Later, we see that Reina is trying to become the best magician in her class. Even at night, she was studying in the library. When she went to put a book back on the shelf, a black book suddenly fell off the shelves. Reina went over and picked it up, only to discover that it was a book on shadow magic. As soon as Reina opened the book, all the lights suddenly went off, and she realized she had made a huge mistake. She immediately put the book back, grabbed her things, and started to return to her room.
But soon,
She noticed that the book was following her. Meanwhile, Nori was practicing cat form with her other classmates in her dormitory, but despite her best efforts, she would transform into various animals within 3 seconds. The next day, Reina saw Nori with her new friends from the window, and she felt a little sad because she thought Nori had forgotten her. Suddenly, the book on shadow magic appeared on its own, and its pages began to flip automatically, stopping at a chapter that taught techniques for unleashing one's hidden powers. When Reina began reading this chapter, a dark cloud suddenly began to hover around her and immediately entered her body. A few hours later, all the new students gathered in a hall to watch a competition between the 2 best students from each class. First up was the Flair's turn, where Philip and Reina faced off. Philip was confident he would easily win the competition, but Reina made the popcorn ahead of time. When Professor Argon ate the popcorn, she was overjoyed because it was absolutely perfect. Finally, Reina was chosen by the Flairs to perform her magic at the annual Founders' Day. At that very moment, Nori arrived and said she had been practicing for several days to perfect her magic. She asked for one last chance to demonstrate her abilities and transformed into a cat. Professor Han was timing her, but after just 4 seconds, Nori's wings sprouted from her back, and she lost control of her powers and became extremely frightened, constantly transforming into strange animals. Reina then tried to calm her friend down. After reading the book of shadow magic, Reina's powers had increased exponentially, and she also could no longer control her fire, causing a massive fireball to form, nearly harming Nori. But then, Nori reverted to her true form. Reina immediately apologized, and Bud came to Nori's aid. Seeing this, Principal Linda scolded Bud and told him to control his students, or else he would lose his job. Afterward, Nori and her friends returned to UDM headquarters, deeply saddened because they had lost hope of using magic again. It was then revealed that many years ago, Bud had been in their same position. He too was a UDM student. He felt bad for these children, so he gathered them in the forest and said that he wasn't happy with this job anyway. He was tired of seeing the UDM children's dreams shattered, so he decided that he would teach these children how to control their powers and use them properly. Then, Bud suddenly began singing, and understanding his language, many of the jungle animals came to him. It was then revealed that Bud was also a UDM student in the fuzzy category. Seeing this, all the children realized that he wasn't alone. Unlike the others, he communicated with the animals by singing, not speaking. In fact, he secretly practiced his magic so that he wouldn't forget it. He promised to train all 4 children in his magic the next morning. Later, as they were returning, Nori was thinking about today's problem. She realized that something was definitely wrong with Reina's magic, and to find out the real reason, she decided to visit Reina. When Reina reached her room, Chandra was standing there holding the book on shadow magic. Chandra said that it was because of this book that her powers had increased so much. Reina realized that this book had nearly cost her best friend Nori her life. She angrily told Chandra to leave the room. However, after Chandra left, the book magically appeared in her room. Reina opened the door in anger, and Nori was standing there. Reina immediately embraced her. However, to prevent Nori from revealing the truth about the shadow magic, Reina had to drive her away from the room. The next morning, as promised, Bud began training his team. First, he tied a pipe around Andres's waist and told him to try to hold himself at one level. Then, Andres took off the backpack and began flying. He still couldn't come down on his own. As the training progressed, the children gradually began to embrace their individual strengths. They no longer wanted to be the same type of magician as the other children. During this time, they all developed a deep friendship. Gradually, they learned to control their magic a little. Elliot began shaping the smoke from his hands, and Pepper learned to repel objects with her power. Furthermore, Nori, instead of confining herself to a single animal, began combining 3 or 4 animals at a time to create new forms. Meanwhile, Reina was watching her friends having fun when Chandra appeared before her. Reina yelled at her and told her to leave. But now, Reina had used the book, meaning they had become the same. Everyone else asked Reina who she was talking to. It was revealed that only Reina could see Chandra. Reina immediately ran to her room, but Chandra began to harass her again. She knew Reina had no idea about her hidden powers. Chandra told her, "Your magic is more powerful than any other child here." Eventually, Reina felt the urge to overcome her inner fear and unleash her true powers. She gave in to Chandra's words and surrendered herself to shadow magic. Moments later, Nori arrived and discovered that Reina was possessed by an evil force. The power of shadow magic didn't only target UDM students. Now, under the control of the dark power, Reina spoke in a savage voice. "Soon the entire school will be destroyed. So, if you love your life, run away." Nori immediately ran to Professor Bud and told him everything. Nori's friends decided to tell the principal the truth, but Bud said Linda would never believe it. So he told the children to wait until the next day. He was confident that the evil spirit would attack tomorrow, on the annual Founders' Day. Then, the next morning, all the children and professors gathered in the garden, and Linda called Reina to the stage to demonstrate her magic. First, Reina welcomed everyone by writing letters in the air with fire while sitting in her seat. Then, she stood up and said that she had prepared something special for today. Suddenly, she created a huge fireball in her hand, and Reina's shadow grew larger and spread across the garden. Then, from within, a frightening voice came, saying, "I have returned after so many years of waiting." Only then did the professor understand that this was the same spirit that had possessed Robert many years ago. Everyone realized that shadow magic didn't only prey on UDM children. To stop this monster from destroying everything, Professor Argon and his students attacked it with a huge fireball, but the monster was unfazed. Then, at the principal's order, the Fuzzies summoned animals to fight the monster, but they ran away in fear. After that, the Fluxers transformed themselves to attack the monster, but they took the form of animals that couldn't harm it. All hope seemed lost. Finally, the UDM children appeared. Pepper used tremendous force with her hands, making the monster step back. Then, Elliot created a wall of smoke so the monster couldn't see anything. Meanwhile, Andres flew through the air to distract it. At the same time, Nori summoned a ferocious beast. Finally, Linda told all the children to combine their powers and attack the monster together, but Nori refused to let anyone get close to her. She knew her best friend Reina was behind the monster. Nori risked her own life so Reina could control the monster from the inside. The monster was about to attack Nori and finish her off, when a massive fireball exploded from within, destroying the monster instantly. Nori saw that Reina was finally free from shadow magic. She breathed a sigh of relief and hugged Reina. In the end, the UDM children had saved Sage Academy from destruction, and from that day on, the UDM program was cancelled. Now, the UDM children, along with the others, began learning to use their special magic. Bud also became a full professor. He would now teach children how to interact with animals in different ways. Friends, if you liked this video and got lost in the story while watching, please subscribe to support us, so we can keep bringing you more videos like this. Thanks for watching.